A single vote, it could totally change the country's constitution, and it's all wrapped up in this thing called the July National Covenant. So what are we actually voting on here? Let's dive in and break it down clause by clause so you know exactly what a yes or no really means. All right, so when you actually get to the ballot, you're going to see one simple question. Do you consent? But here's the thing, and this is the tricky part. You're not just consenting to one thing. A yes vote is a big thumbs up to a whole package of 4 major constitutional reforms. So let's unpack what's inside that package. Okay, first up on the list is something that gets right to the heart of the whole democratic process, how we run our elections. The big idea here is to bring in a system that's designed to guarantee fairness and neutrality for, everyone involved. So this clause wants to bring back what's known as a caretaker government. Now, what is that? Well, it's basically a neutral, totally non-political group that takes charge of the country, but only during an election. Their one and only job? To make sure there's a level playing field for all the political parties. So a yes vote means bringing this system back into play. But, this whole reform thing goes way deeper than just the government. It also calls for a complete overhaul of the Election Commission and other super important constitutional bodies. We're talking about rebuilding the entire framework for running elections, all based on the new rules in this July covenant. And that brings us to the second major proposal. And let me tell you, this one's a biggie. It's a huge structural change to the country's legislature, maybe one of the biggest in its entire history. The core idea is actually pretty straightforward. We'd move from the single-house parliament we have now to a two-house system. You might hear it called bicameral. And that means creating an entirely new upper chamber in the legislature, a whole new house. So, you might be asking, how would this new upper house even work? Well, it would have 100 members, and their seats would be handed out based on the percentage of the total national vote each political party gets. What this does is it makes sure the upper house really reflects the country's overall political vibe, not just who happened to win in certain districts. And this is absolutely crucial. This new upper house wouldn't just be for show. It would have real, actual power. To be specific, any attempt to change the Constitution in the future would need its stamp of approval. That adds a powerful new check and balance to the entire political system. All right, now for the third proposal. And honestly, this is the most expansive one of them all. It's not just one little tweak. It's a whole sweeping agenda of governance reforms that would get locked right into the Constitution. So, a yes vote here would legally tie the hands of future parliaments. It would bind them, and whichever parties are in power, to implement a national consensus on 30 specific issues. You can think of it like a pre-approved reform package that future governments are required to put into action. So what's actually in this 30-point plan? Well, for starters, parliamentary reforms. We're talking about increasing the number of women representatives. And get this, giving key roles like the deputy speaker and committee chairs directly to the opposition. The idea is to create a parliament that's more balanced and maybe a little less, confrontational. The plan also gets into the nitty-gritty of balancing power across the whole government. It demands some pretty big changes, strengthening the independence of the judiciary, which is huge. It also means setting term limits for the prime minister, reviewing the president's powers, and finally, empowering local governments to shift more authority away from the center. And the one guiding principle that really ties all 30 of these points together is a core commitment to protect and uphold the fundamental constitutional rights of every single citizen. That's the bedrock of it all. Okay, on to the fourth and final clause of the referendum. This one kind of acts like a catch-all, a binding promise that's really designed to make sure the entire scope of the July Covenant actually gets carried out. Right. Think of this final clause as the padlock on the entire agreement. It's what makes the whole thing legally enforceable. It says that political parties must implement all the other reforms they've promised in the covenant. It's really designed to turn all those political promises into concrete action. So let's put it all together. What does your vote actually mean? A yes vote means you're on board with this entire package, bringing back the caretaker government, creating that new two-house parliament, and committing the nation to the full 30-point reform agenda. On the flip side, a no vote means the constitutional framework we have now stays exactly as it is. So really, the final question you have to ask yourself isn't just about the nitty-gritty details of these 4 proposals. It's about something much bigger. Whether you believe the country needs a fundamental redesign of its entire political structure. Because at the end of the day, that is what is on the table. The choice is whether to stick with the current system or to lock in a completely new path for the nation's future.